Welcome to the Hymancast, a podcast of the Hyman Settlement School, where we explore the history, the culture, and people that make the Hyman Settlement School what it is today, and how this historic institution will continue to serve its mission of celebrating heritage and changing lives in Central Appalachia. I'm Corey Terry. And welcome to another episode of the Hymancast, coming to you here in the month of April. And I'm excited for April. Things are finally coming back to life. Grass is growing. Things are warming up. And even though we've had lots of crazy weather lately, it's been nice, to walk outside and not be freezing to death. So I'm very excited about everything April brings and offers, and excited to see things ramping up here at the Hyman Settlement School, and literally new life coming as I'm looking over here to my left and see a tower of growing tomatoes and cucumber plants that I've been working on since early February, and we are about to get those going in our greenhouse, which you may be aware flooded a couple of years ago, and we are finally getting that back up and running. And my tomatoes and cucumbers are in desperate need of going inside of that greenhouse right now, but we are still working on getting everything ready and repaired. So hopefully that will be coming here soon. We also got some spring writers retreats coming up here very soon. We got Silas House coming in this weekend. As I record, it is April 3rd. And Silas House is coming this weekend and for the spring writers retreat. And then the following week, we'll have another Spring Writers Retreat with Melissa Helton, our Literary Arts Director. So we have lots of things coming up here at the Settlement School as the weather warms up and things start to get moving along. But one of those things that we want to talk about today, and specifically, is the Appalachian Songwriters Weekend that we have. We have a new event we have started. We'll be going in conjunction with the Appalachian Writers Workshop, and will take place the weekend before on July 19th through the 20th. So we have several great instructors coming that weekend to teach workshops and lead concerts and songwriting circles. We'll even have one-on-one songwriting coaching and recording sessions for you and your music. We'll have Dale Ann Bradley and Nicholas Jamerson coming that weekend, as well as Doug Van Gundy and Anna Klein and our very own Sarah Kate Morgan, and our guest today, Matthew Sidney Parsons, will all be here that weekend. And today Sarah Kate is going to interview Matthew and talk a little bit about the Appalachian Songwriters Weekend coming up, but more specifically, songwriting in general. And Matthew shares several of his songs that he has written, and it's just a great time, a great conversation, and great to hear his songs. And so I will turn that over to Sarah Kate.
Well, hey, y'all. My name is Sarah Kate Morgan, and welcome to the Hymancast. I usually say that I'm the music teacher at the settlement, but my big job title is Traditional Arts Education Director. And every day my work here is a little bit different, but it's always fun. And today it's especially fun because I get to interview one of my favorite musicians, songwriters, poets, and just a dear friend of the bosom, Matthew Sidney Parsons. So welcome, Matt, to the Hymancast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah Kate. I'm so glad to be doing this.
Yeah, me too. So, for our listeners, if you ever make it to our lovely campus here on the banks of Troublesome Creek, it doesn't take you long to notice that this place has a particular ring of magic to it, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I think it has to do with our campus, has to do with our food, has to do with the music, the music programs and the education programs we do, has to do with the writing that is born in this place. But I think, as with many things in life, it boils down to people and relationships, and the people that come and go through the settlement throughout the years, and that bring their best creativeness to this place is what makes Hyman Settlement a sort of hidden gem in the mountains. And Matt is one of those people, he's a dear friend and has been part of the Hyman Magic for many years now. Matt is a rising voice in Appalachian literature, both in poetry and songwriting. I'll say a few words of introduction, and then we'll dive right into some music. But Matt is a man of many talents and many good words. He's a poet, a Grammy-nominated songwriter, and an educator from Eastern Kentucky. His work has been published in Rattle, Pine Hill Press, Still, Two River View, and he also holds an MFA in creative writing from EKU's Bluegrass Writers Studio. He's a leading member of his family band Whistle and Fish and also tours as a solo artist. Parsons lives on a family subsistence homestead in Olive Hill, Kentucky with his wife and his 2 babies, Hattie Jane and Sydney Goodnight. Leave it to a writer to have like the best names for your kids. And I also wanted to say that, you can't make good art without good fuel, and Matt is fueled by lots of homemade cheese and homemade bread and homemade ginger beer and fermented pickles by his equally talented and capable wife, Anuette, who I love very dearly, and who is an amazing writer in her own right. So before we get started, I'd love to hear a song.
Yes, ma'am, you got it. A little bit of this song called Too Late to Be Sober. It's been a few years since I spent the day sober, but I'm good at pretending when we've got company over. I don't want to embarrass the wife, spend the rest of the night defending my right to stay drunk till they all go back homeward. It's too late to be sober. I've had a few drags through the weeds and the briars, and it's about time we prescribed a few fires. Clear out the brush in the yard, 'cause it's thick, and that's part of the work that it takes to make sure that she'll still let me hold her. It's too late to be sober. It's too late to start now, and I wouldn't know how. It ain't hurting no one but me. When I'm up on the roof, making it weatherproof, up on the roof is the first thing that I've got to be. I work hard till the working day's over. It's too late to be sober. I've said my goodnights. I hope I didn't offend you. Y'all have a safe drive. And say hello to my nephews. Well, them boys grow up quick till they find them a fix. They take that first sip and it sticks, and they never get older. It's too late to be sober. It's too late to start now, and I wouldn't know how. It ain't hurting no one but me. When I'm up on the roof, making it weatherproof, up on the roof is the first thing that I've got to be. I work hard till the working day's over. It's too late to be sober. It's too late to be sober.
It's everything I can do to not sing harmony on this end. But that would probably really mess up something audio-wise. I love that song. I love that song, Matt. That song has a lot of work in it. You're working a lot in that song.
Yeah, I mean, well, not so much me as other people that it's like based on. But I mean, you can't write a song without putting your own experience in it and the experience of everyone else who you've ever met. So like it ends up being everybody.
Yeah.
Which I guess is kind of the point.
Absolutely. Well, this leads us into sort of the first vein of things that I enjoy, that I always enjoy talking to you about when we're not being recorded. So it makes it easier when we are recorded. You know, a songwriting formula that you shared with me years ago is that is based around somebody who has an interesting job. And it's just a great generative idea for songwriting. And I think that's a perfect song to illustrate that. But can you tell us more about that formula and maybe play a song that came from that formula?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's easy to pull a song out that came from it because I taught this as a workshop during the summer of COVID, 2020, and I had a lot of opportunity to express the form. I had students who wanted to see it in action, so I ended up being really generative during that time. So the form is more or less, it's kind of a leaping off point, and it's especially useful for folks who might be interested in songwriting or might be interested in just writing in general, and they kind of want to understand where to bridge the gap. Or if you're a songwriter already and you just want something that's going to jumpstart that next idea. And hopefully it can be adapted to, other concepts, other places to start. But where I always start, like you said, is I try to start with someone has an interesting job, and obviously that could be anything, and it doesn't even have to be a job. It could simply be a hobby or a defining characteristic. For example, if you write a song about someone who's disabled, then their disability, if you're not careful, kind of ends up being the dominant part of the song. It becomes what the song is about. So if you have another point in mind, you have to kind of leap off from somewhere else. With that form, I think of it in multiple layers, just to say, we'll go ahead and say first verse, second verse, third verse, even though I know a lot of songs extend beyond that form. But for me, they represent the layers so easily. So assume we're talking about a 3-verse song, and each layer is getting us from that point of concrete, that work, that job, that defining characteristic, to all the way over into something emotionally connected and that might be a more universal experience. So hopefully taking something as specific as it can be and then turning it into something that everyone can relate to. And that seems complicated, seems like a big task, but in terms of the way I try to think about it, I just try to break it down into the steps as best I can. So our first verse or our first layer might be the situation. What is this character's job? What are they doing? How does that define their day? And that can mean either dropping the listener right into the action, drop them right into the person working, or you can sort of describe what their day starting out looks like, or maybe it's the end of their day and they're stressed out, and that's full of energy, right? So you can mine there. But try to stay right there on the surface for that first verse so we can introduce your listener to something, really concrete. And I'll talk about choruses in a minute, but that's a little bit of a different thing. And then our second layer, our second verse, as we lead into that, we want to get a little deeper, right? We want to see that character show some of their humanity. So I always ask, well, how does the character, quite simply, how do they feel about the situation they're in? If it's a really difficult job or a low income job, then obviously their feelings are going to be defined by that. If it's a thing that they do because they love it, even though it doesn't pay them, then their feelings will be defined by that, right? And that step is a little bit of a short step versus the next step. As you move from that second layer into the third layer, from the second verse into the third verse, you want to ask the question, how does the character feel about how they feel? And I typically refer to this as kind of like the moment of reflection. And it's kind of meta, I know, but there is the easy way to say it is everyone has felt loss, but with the specifics of a song, you might have a character that feels a very particular kind of loss. Like, for example, maybe they've lost an important family member, maybe like their grandmother, right? And And that's a very specific emotion. Not everyone in the world has had that exact emotion, right? But everyone in the world has had the emotion of feeling, sad and then feeling guilty about it. Does that make sense? So in that third layer, we're just trying to give the character the opportunity basically to judge themselves, as everyone does, right? So if you've got a character with a really hard job, and in the second layer, how they feel about it is they're sick of this job. They've, it's take this job and shove it, but it kind of goes further, right? That song, in my opinion, it goes to the second layer and it kind of stops there. So then if you go, okay, well, that's how he feels about the job, then how does he feel when he reflects on his own feelings? Well, that's when you start to get the complexity of humanity, someone judging themselves for feeling that way. Well, I'm lucky to have this job, so I shouldn't be so ungrateful, or I'm ashamed of myself for letting it get this far, that kind of thing. And then choruses are a little bit different, and I can talk about them. But the song that came into mind for me is a song that doesn't really have a chorus. It's got some of those layers in verse, and then it kind of comes back around and repeats the first verse as the chorus. So I can play a little bit of that if you'd like.
Please. What job does this person have?
Do what?
What job does this person have?
So I was glad that you brought this song up, and I hadn't thought about it in a while. A friend of mine was visiting, and I was talking. I just sort of started to uncover my ideas in this songwriting form, and I was like, it's like you can write a song about literally anything. And a friend of mine said, "Oh yeah, well, can you write a song about the guy who buffs the floor in the grocery store?" And I said, "Well, you made it too easy on me. It rhymed right off the bat." So that's this song. When it rains, it pours. I ain't broke no more. Buffing floors in grocery stores, stealing from the register. Where the drawer almost opens on its own. I think I'll get a pizza, take it home. My girls want me reading from the labels, sounding out the words they've never seen. If I had more education, well, maybe I'd be able. But can't nobody tell them what they mean. I'm cruising my machine through the aisles of fruits and greens, taking what I need when I know I won't be seen. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't so easy. I wouldn't take what I didn't earn. Pass the time for nursery rhymes, I hop on my steed and ride. My pride ain't really none of your concern. The boss man wants to give me a promotion. He says I need the day shift, and he's right. But I can't feed my family on the money like I can on what I'm taking in the night. When it rains, it pours, ain't broke no more. Buffing floors in grocery stores and stealing from the register. Where the drawer almost opens on its own. I think I'll get a pizza and take it home.
My favorite line is, "Oh, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't so easy."
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's like there's a real disconnect. And if this was someone who was like working at your local mom and pop convenience store or whatever, you'd never see a buffing machine, so you'd never see someone who is engaging.
So you know
in
it's
this
probably
kind of
Walmart or something.
yeah. It's got to be a business that's really just totally dehumanized. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it would be hard to do it, right? It would be a
Yeah.
moral question. But he says it's easier than that.
Yeah, and it
I
seems.
can talk a little bit about how that plays, about the form of that one if you want.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go through it quick. I don't want to waste too much time on it. But when we're talking about, songwriting, and I think that Heinemann is so famous for its literary power, and that it's really nice to be starting to branch off into the songwriting world. I know it's had a big impact on traditional music and dance, but to be working its way into songwriting, I think is a really good sign about the direction that the songwriting industry can go. Because, we're churning out tons of great songwriters in Kentucky and in Central Appalachia in general. But it certainly will be nice to see folks, thinking about it on a new level, on a deeper level. It's connected to culture. It's connected to workshopping, which in songwriting world is a little less common than you'd see in poetry and fiction. And so, but anyway, that song really kind of easily stratifies into those layers that I was talking about. You get your situation. When it rains, it pours. Ain't broke no more. I'm buffing floors in grocery stores. I'm stealing from the register. That's the situation. There's no emotion to it. It just is what it is. And then it goes a sort of layer deeper, a little bit more of his situation as it moves into that next verse. The very beginning of that next verse is my girls want me reading from the labels. So you're starting to learn that this person's situation is a little more complex than just working at the grocery store, right? Yeah. This is a father, maybe a single father, who, it also could be a mother. Really, there's no reason why it couldn't be, who is of a low socioeconomic status. So a little bit more situation explained right there. Then we start to get into the emotional aspect, how he feels about this situation, as he starts to say, I'm cruising my machine through the aisles of fruits and green, taking what I need when I know I can't be seen. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't so easy. So there's the emotional aspect of it. How does he feel about it? Well, he thinks that it's morally fine, because if it was a hard moral decision, he wouldn't be doing it. And his pride is not something that he thinks others need to worry about. Like, don't you have more respect for yourself than stealing? And the answer is, I don't think pride enters into it. I have a job to do. I got to feed these kids, and this is how I choose to do it. Yeah. And then there's that next layer, right? The how he feels, his reflection on how he feels, which we've already gotten a taste of right there, right? He's saying, yes, it does affect my pride, but I don't think that's anyone else's business. And that's kind of that reflective moment. But then we get more of that. We move into that last verse when he reveals that his boss is willing to give him a better position, right? He's willing to increase his pay and put him on day shift. But he's gotten kind of addicted to this particular way of doing things. And he's found that for him, when he makes it works better than the best job he could get does, because he has access to all this. So it's a trap. He's admitting that it's wrong, but that it's a trap he doesn't see a good way out of, that it's the most sense to keep doing it. And I think the biggest emotional punch for this song comes when we repeat that first verse again. Even though it's just the situation, after all of this discussion about like his opportunities and the sadness of it all, and then you get that first line again, when it rains, it pours, I ain't broke no more. It's almost like just elated. So there's that another layer of emotional depth where he's saying, honestly, when it all comes down to it, am I ashamed of it? Yes. But how I feel about that is, I'm happy. I would do it again. It makes sense. It works for us. I'm feeding my family.
And the third verse makes the first verse even more meaningful. And I feel like I'm thinking about the difference between the songs that I've heard that are somewhat forgettable and the songs that I've heard that really stick with me. Is songs that are forgettable often talk too much. They skip the formula of verse 1 and 2, and they skip to the feelings part. They, songs that only talk about your feelings are usually not very effective songs, because that's not how we. It may make sense to us personally, like writing in a journal, but if you're trying to communicate something, exclusively saying, I feel sad, I feel lonely, or I feel I'm in love, or like, that kind of thing. But show me why, and I think this formula does that in such a lovely way.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of confessional poetry, where the I is always the central figure, and that's a very popular form of poetry, but it's kind of newly become that popular in poetry. Traditionally, the I really took a back seat to the thing that was trying to be described, and I liken it to being like, poetry is for things that don't have a dictionary definition, and so. How do you describe to someone who's never experienced something what that experience, not just what it is, but what it feels like? And you really have to go through these layers of emotional depth to get there. If you jump off the deep end, you go straight into emotion, then you're right. It's where's my guide, where's my frame of reference?
There's nothing that grounds you in reality.
And
absolutely. I'd love to segue into talking about teaching songwriting, because this is I love this formula because it helps. Anybody can write a song with that formula, and I love that. I did it. I kind of borrowed some ideas from that for writing with kids, with the work that I do, and we talked about what was the song about? It was about today was a very good day. It was kind of a song about reflecting. I asked them to think about a memory of a really special day they had, and I asked them to describe, like, what did you see, what did you do that day, and then why was it a good day. We didn't start with, why was it a good day. We started with describing the things around them. So and it works for kids too, in its own way.
I did a character song workshop with a young group, and they were really, we talked about Amos Moses, which is kind of like a ridiculous song, but it worked. Nice. We could work through the layers with it, and they really respond to it. So that's awesome. I love to hear that it's being used that way.
Well, one thing I'm really excited to share with folks is that we have this longstanding tradition of the Appalachian Writers Workshop here at the settlement that has brought about so much creativity and from this fertile ground of Heinemann. But songwriting has recently, more so than I think in the past, has been a big part of the week. And this year, for the first time, we're happy to host the Appalachian Songwriters Weekend, the weekend before the Appalachian Writers Workshop. And Matt's going to be there. Myself, Matt Parsons, and Doug Van Gundy we're kind of working together to put this thing together. It's going to be July 19th and 20th before the Writers Workshop. There's going to be songwriting workshops, concerts, open mics with like feedback from people like Matt and our other staff songwriters, and as well as an opportunity to sign up for one-on-one songwriting coaching and sort of editing sessions, which I think Matt particularly is good at. And as well as you can sign up for a demo recording session. You can take home a demo of your writing. And I'm excited to talk more about the workshop that you're going to be offering. So what are you going to be doing?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start right with the basics. In my opinion, that good songwriting technique starts with being a good listener. So I start with lyric analysis and how do we understand. I use that form really more for listening than I do for writing anymore, because I guess the writing process has become sort of innate to me. So I just kind of go through the motions, and I'm not really consciously thinking about it. But if someone wants me to evaluate a song, I kind of go down the list and I say, okay, check, we've got the situation, check, we've got the emotion, and then, it goes like that. So I'll definitely be talking about how to listen to songs. The big thing for me in that instance is being critical, like learning to say, it's okay to say, hey, I love this person, I love this artist, but hey, this song's it's fallen flat for me, or it's not not every poem in the entire world that was ever published is a great poem. They all have things that can be worked differently, or maybe it's just subjective, but there's always something we can say about how we might have done it, right? And I think that songwriting is such a personal thing. It's really hard to put it into that space, especially since that's not been the traditional place for songwriting. But yeah, so listening to a song, hopefully by somebody that like kind of nobody in the room knows, it's at least not knows personally, it's a little bit separate, so we can say, okay, what's working and what isn't working. So for me, it'll be lyric analysis, the basics. I'll talk about the form, but more as a rubric for what we're looking for. We listen to Wild Thing. Does it hit all the boxes? We can still love the song, but maybe it doesn't hit all the boxes, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited about the weekend. Definitely check it out if you're.
I mean, Dale Ann Bradley, Nicholas Jackson, kidding me?
Yeah,
we're gonna have a blast. Anna Klein,
yeah. We've got like Matt just said, those three plus Cody Lee Meese, a great country writer, as well as Doug Van Gundy. Van Gundy is going to be teaching some a traditional session with me. How do you blend the tradition of Appalachian music with your writing? So this would be a good time for us to talk about that. I grew up playing traditional music, playing traditional bluegrass and old time music. So it often feels like when I write a song, it's already out there, and I just pull it from. I just dip my ladle into the stream of traditional music, and it comes. And I wonder, is that a similar experience for you? And have you found that the music you played growing up in traditional music has influenced your writing? And if you have a song to share on that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I will say, just kind of a general answer to the question, I don't know that I have a way of divorcing the two things. If I could write a song that I feel like isn't influenced by traditional writing, I'm not aware of it. Though, that being said, a lot of my songs, I guess when I talk about songwriting from the ground up, I usually, we kind of talk about, I think the terms are a little bit undefined. It's unfortunate, but kind of like head songs versus story songs. And I think even though traditional music has a way of walking the fine line and getting to that emotional depth without everything being all in your head, but there are some songs that I write that I think probably fall more in the head song. It's as a mental experience that a person is having. And that's really been popularized kind of more contemporarily in Appalachia versus, when we talk about traditional songs, go all the way back, we'll say, those songs were intended to be the news of the day. There wasn't printed papers traveling from one town to the next. It was a guy with an instrument who, learned what the story was in that town. He took it over to the next town and sang it in order to remember it. And then a lot of the time reuse those melodies, which is why we end up with so many traditional songs that are the same melody with different words, or the same words and different melodies. So kind of coming at it from that angle, there is a responsibility in traditional music to report the state of things. What
and
it's
I think
like
just in folk music in general, how are things going right now with regular people?
Yeah, that's right, with regular people. Yeah. I mean, in the song that it's a little bit more modern, but one of the songs that I kind of use as my signpost there is The Old Home Place off Rounder 44. It's a great traditional song. What have they done with the old home place? Why did they tear it down? Why did I leave my plow in the field and look for a job in the town? It so beautifully captures the plight of working people, of the economic status at that time, what people were facing, the kinds of decisions that were being made. And it harkens back to a lovely, nostalgic, pastoral thing. So I try to bring some of that with me into my songs as I move forward. I mean, of course, there are lots of other things that could be explored in traditional songwriting. Life and death is a major theme. And I think, again, a lot of the time it kind of announces itself as traditional, either by the way the music is being played or simply by the lyrics having obvious socioeconomic factors at play. So like even I'm thinking about Olabelle Reed's Over Yonder in the Graveyard, right? There is something about that song that communicates not just the heartbreak of the situation, but proximity to the graveyard gives you information, the image of the place, the reality that this would most likely happen in a poor family. I think that it's a very informative song for that reason. But I can play a song that's not nearly as serious, nor in my opinion as beautiful as Over Yonder in the Graveyard. I'm going to try my best to play everything in G tonight, so I don't have to put cape on. So So when we live on a, like I said earlier, on a family subsistence homestead. We try to, and so by subsistence, we really mean we try to just produce things for us, everything we need, which means we don't produce excess that is a quote unquote marketable product. We just are just doing it for the family that lives here. And I can't recommend that lifestyle highly enough. But when we first moved here, Dad bought a tractor and like sort of instantly was like, well, we're going to need some kind of implement. And we bought that tractor basically as soon as we got it, like a couple of years after being here. We've been here for 12 years. And it broke immediately. It has been usable for maybe 10% of the time, and so this song is kind of about that and about the tradition of the area. And I think you'll hear some of those things I talked about with traditional songs in general. Sorry for being long-winded. Tractor, and that old worn out tractor was my pride and joy. Drove it across the mountain, pouring oil like a fountain. Ain't no John Deere, but it ain't no Tonka toy. Back then the farm was covered in tobacco, peak to pink and the bottom land laying in between. Tractor pulled the plow, though Lord I don't know how, 'cause each day something broke on that poor old machine. And the soil went to sand, 'cause I can't work the land for all the time I spend cranking on the bolts of that old hand. Keeping it together has been a hard endeavor. Lord have mercy on a working man. Had to sell the farm today and it brought $5,000, but by now that little tractor's worth $100,000. Well, the bank came and took all of the money. They told me that I owed on my speck of dust, and now I'm cruising down the blues in my Massey 52. This ain't the place for working tools and old fools like us. And tomorrow I'll be moving to the city, and I don't have the heart to sell my good machine. So I'll be speaking truth to power, doing 7 miles an hour, rolling down on Main, running on hopes and dreams. And the soil went to sand, 'cause I can't work the land for all the time I spend cranking on the bolts of that old can. I had to sell the farm today and it brought $5,000, but by now that little tractor's worth $100,000. Yes, by now that little tractor's worth $100,000.
It's hard to write songs that have humor in them. It's really hard. It's harder than writing a sad song. It is so hard to write a funny song.
That's way harder. Happy songs and funny songs are easily like the biggest. I've said this to you before, that the biggest challenge for a really great songwriter who's done it all is writing a really good Christmas song. And even then, I think it's so easy to fall into sad, right? The Christmas songs I've written, which I really enjoyed writing, end up being sad. So yeah, because that's easy. That's the easy entry point. We've all experienced sadness, and also our sad experiences just stand out in our minds so clearly, as opposed to our happiness, which becomes this kind of amorphous single experience. over the course of our lives. It's kind of always with us.
Right.
And
Well,
it loses its.
our heartbreaking memories are the ones that like are cemented.
Sure enough.
Well, we've had such a great chat, and it's great talking. And before we finish off with one last song, I think I'd like to take a step back, and it's so nice, talking about work and about people and how that affects your songwriting, and but sort of a layer outside of that is how does your identity as an Appalachian influence your songwriting? Like, would you describe yourself as an Appalachian songwriter, and what does that mean to you, and how does that show up in your songwriting?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure I'll answer it adequately, but I'll try to do so, and try to do it briefly. The short answer is yes. I identify as Appalachian. I learned that I was Appalachian when I was a teenager, and it made perfect sense to me. It was something I didn't know the terminology, and I had never heard that I was Appalachian. I didn't, but as soon as I did hear that and I understood the definition of it, I immediately was like, oh, well, that's me. Well, how nice is it to have a definable identity like that. At the time, I was from West Virginia. I didn't want to be known as a West Virginian at the time because I was a teenager and I wanted to just get out of there, and wow, has that perspective really changed, but yeah, and I guess songwriting is a big part of that, because I've had to sort of reach back into my experience and my love for the place and find out, what makes me in order to make my songwriting good. And that's resulted in me having, to really change my perspective on what it meant to be from West Virginia or from Appalachia or, in general. I will say that I think people who experience socioeconomic hardship or hardships of any kind have a jump start on art in general. The panic that enters your body, the anxiety, the fight or flight response that gets engaged by trauma makes us like flowers left in the dark, makes us want to bloom. It creates this, this sense of drive to put all of us out there before it's too late to. And I think that is, it plays into the Appalachian nihilism thing, the knowledge, death is there, it's around the corner, it's going to happen. And so, I have to get this out there before that happens, or more than that, just I have to experience this joy. This, songwriting, music in general is one of those moments of just like, if you're really into it and you're not thinking about it too hard, it is sheer bliss. There's nothing, you can let go of all your thoughts. You can meditate in that moment. It's really powerful when you do manage to get there. And I think people in desperate situations like the folks in Appalachia tend to be, really just, they have to have it. It's one of the very few escapes that are available. And obviously, my identity as a man plays into that. And I think that's a huge responsibility. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but just a huge amount of responsibility to be a man in this region and to make a definition for that isn't harmful to others, that isn't demeaning to others. As Willie Carver points it out, it's not about admonishment, it's about affirmation. So, anytime we think about what makes men, at least in this region for me, and that's the only perspective I have, so it's the only one I'll speak to. There's a lot of men just being told, well, you can't do that if you want to be a man. You can't do that if you want to be a man. And there's a whole lot of things, you can't be a child. You can't be a woman. You can't be, all these things that you're not allowed to be in order to be a man, as opposed to giving affirmations of some kind, like, hey, you're doing this thing really naturally. And that's great, because that's a great positive quality. And if you're going to identify as a man, you need to hang on to that and make it a big part of your personality. If you're generous, great. Make that part of your male identity. Yeah. That doesn't mean that generosity is exclusive to men, of course, but it's such an important thing that men in our region take some responsibility for who they are and what effect that has on other people, and carry that forward. So you see a little bit of that in in that buffing floors in grocery stores. This, at least for me, it was a guy in the story. You know, it can be for anybody, any listener, it can be anybody, but that it's this guy who is looking at the back of this soup can, and his kids are trying to ask him what those words are. And he can't read them. And even if he could, he admits that he's not sure that it would make any sense anyway. And so you're trying to get a little bit of my sustainability lifestyle kind of threaded into my songs too. All of those play a huge role. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but my identity as an Appalachian, my identity as a man, and of course my other facets of my identity give me a sense of responsibility in my songwriting. I have a job to do.
I swear I was talking to an older gentleman whose wife, just a friend here locally, and his wife is having some health problems, and he was talking about, you know, kind of caretaking of her, and he said, almost even verbatim from your line, he's like, well, she's gotten me eating healthier, and now I gotta read the backs of cans or backs of bags. I just thought of that. That's a very maybe sort of older Appalachian man thing to say. And a lot of your work has centered around Appalachian identity, specifically, what does it mean to be a man in Southern Appalachia? And your recent work, your recent chapbook, Mountain Roosters, is kind of all about that. And if now is a good time, it'd be great to hear a little bit from the chapbook, and then maybe a song from that, and we can call it a night.
Absolutely. I'd love to. I'll read a quick one. I don't want to spend too awful much time on it, but I will say that this chapbook is about having examples. I wanted to talk about masculinity, but I didn't really know how to talk about it. For one thing, because I didn't understand the definition of it myself for me, and I still don't I don't think anyone ever does. Dick Haig was at our Appalachian Studies Association presentation, and he said it's on becoming. You know, it's just, you never make it, but you have to become it all the time. And that's such a ridiculous paradox and such a beautiful thing. So rather than try to write poems about the male experience or about what it means to be a man, I did what I think everyone sort of does subconsciously, and just look around for examples. You know, who are people who I feel like they, for better or worse, they made it. You know, that was their definition for me. And one of those people for me was my grandfather, my poppy. That's my mom's dad, who we talked about a lot at the conference this past bit, because he was hugely influential in the anti-mountaintop removal movement, mountain justice, and they paid some homage to him at a panel, and it was so beautiful to see his name. And a friend of mine, Junior Walk, wrote a beautiful book about his experience with Coal River Mountain Watch, and he brought up my grandfather in there. But he died of COPD, and it was really difficult for everybody. But I think it really frustrated him, what was happening to him, and the nature of COPD. As your oxygen levels get lower and lower, it gets harder and harder to think clearly. So I think that played into it. But that's what this poem is about, and he's a great example of masculinity. But this was a moment of a very, at least for me, a typical male experience in Appalachia. Not necessarily a positive one, but it's real. So this is kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's called Planned Parenthood. It's for Sid. I ain't planning on it raining, he said. The way he said it, you would have thought it was up to him. He was one of those thin men with a winning smile, grinning ear to ear like he was hearing a good joke all the time. Throw them taters in the basket, he said. Just pick 'em up, hope for luck, and chuckle. But luck is such a fickle thing, like belt buckles and banjo strings, things that always need adjusting and can be found lying around and rusting. He was good, as grandpas go, until his legs began to slow, and rocks had grown inside his lungs, and anger touched his dancing tongue. He didn't mean to call me lazy. That's just some crazy joke he told, 'cause he didn't feel like growing old. Yeah, so kind of touching on a big part of maleness or the question of being a male or being masculine, which of course are kind of different things, but the question of that, for me, it often comes from the older folks around us who have been examples of that for us. And I think one of the universal experiences of those folks is having to struggle with that identity themselves and being unsure of whether or not they quote unquote made it, even after they've, even if they're at the end of their lives. I played a show in Withville, Virginia for a room it was unusual because it was mostly older men, which is not usually the audiences that I get at readings and songwriting things. And you could see the doubt on their faces. I told them, I'm going to talk about male identity. And they were like, okay, young man, what are you going to tell us? And so I started off by saying, raise your hand if you know confidently that you are a man. And, of course, all these guys raised their hand. And I said, okay, now raise your hand if you know confidently exactly when that happened. And, nobody. It was such a hush, in that moment, because people have, plenty of, experiences that make them feel like maybe they are. But they, we often lack community and confirmation, and really like Willie Carver said, affirmation. We lack some level of, yeah, you're doing a good job, and it doesn't matter what your identity is. If it's about your gender identity, it's about your religious identity, it's about your cultural identity, your job or your profession, your hobby, any of those things. It's so important to have mentors that can say, yeah, you're doing good, just keep going. And when we don't have that, we quit playing guitar. We abandon our love for music. We abandon our jobs. We question our value in the world. And so, yeah, as he got older, even though he had such an amount of purpose, he's the one growing potatoes. He's the one that knows what to do and how to deal with it. And yet is so in such crisis at the end of his life that he lashes out at others. And I think that often is because of that lack of affirmation that existed in life, that they need. He's going to say, you're being lazy, you can't do that if you're going to want to be a man. And again, it comes back to that like negativity thing where you're learning more from the negatives than you are from positive affirmations. I had an interesting experience that I've had with my dad is that I've been able to avoid what I think are a lot of the common pitfalls of male to male relationships, in that he grew up, of course, in a generation of folks who grew up with those negatives, right? He was not getting affirmations, he was getting admonishments. But I guess he was aware of himself enough to know that was happening, and he and I would communicate back and forth, and he was always warning me. He was always letting me know, hey, you're getting to that age where we're going to butt heads, and it's not going to be about whether one of us is right or not. It's going to be about the fact that you're a young man and I'm your dad. He was able to communicate those things to me, and I was really lucky. And I think that he was able to because he had a level of confidence that he derived from, I guess, learning about his own identity, but more importantly, being able to do things in life that he loved. So, he wanted to live on a farm. He wanted to have a homestead. He did it. He spent years building up enough money to do it, and spent more years building it on a piece of property that was, suboptimal when we arrived on it. And if he hadn't been able to do that, it would have been a tragic amount of conflict, because it wouldn't just be me questioning my own identity and whether or not I felt like I'd had affirmations, but it would be him too. And then we both are just like, struggling and having to prove things all the time. So I know that we're running short, but for a last song, if you don't mind, I thought I'd play this song called Piece of Me, which is, it's me imagining if my dad had been forced to live in a suburb his whole life, what would our conflict with one another have looked like? Would I have just gone to high school, like a normal kid? Would I have just gone out and gotten a job and moved away from home like so many people do?
and what would that have felt like to him? So that's what this song is about. Sorry for ranting a bit. But
I think that's what podcasts are for. I think our job is to just talk. So I think you're good.
Thank you, Sarah Kate. Here we go. Off and I left them by the door. Took my hat and hung it by the frame. Drove to work this morning, but I don't work there anymore, so I come back home to watch the game. They should have told us back in 1969 a young man's dreams don't come true. I thought I'd spend my best years in the shadow of the pines, but I'm standing in this driveway, wasting them with you. I don't know where you think you're going, and frankly it don't matter if I do. But if you're going someplace better, take a piece of me with you. About your memories of me, I can't stand living in the past. As far as I remember, Lord, I hated everything, and I don't waste time on looking back. Sure, you were a tough one, and I guess I'd say it's true. You made a lot of people proud. What you did ain't even half of what's allowed. I don't know where you think you're going, and frankly it don't matter if I do. But if you're going someplace better, take a piece of me with you. From breaking down, Lord knows it won't take long. Freedom ain't worth nothing if you spend it in this town, but even less after you're gone. I've learned a woman can take all that's good in me, make it feel like a mistake. The sun is good for taking everything. That ain't the same as having everything it takes. I don't know where you think you're going, and frankly it don't matter if I do. And if you're going someplace better, take a piece of me with you. Take a piece of me.
Thanks, Matt, for sharing blessing us with some beautiful, beautiful songs that make us think. I always like that about your songwriting.
Thank you so much for letting me do it. It's my love, and I love to share it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sharing, we're excited to have you here at Hyman. If any of y'all are budding songwriters, or aspiring songwriters, or professional songwriters, or somewhere in between all of that, we'd love to have you join us this summer. at our Appalachian Songwriters Weekend. Matt will be there. I'll be there. A lot of other cool people will be there. Thanks, Matt. If you want to share, it'd probably be good. Do you want to direct folks to where they can find your songwriting or connect with you?
So I have a single out that's on all streaming platforms. It's called Middle Class. You can look it up, just Matthew Sidney Parsons or Matthew Parsons. I'm sure it'll come up. My wife, who we talked about earlier, is who fuels this whole everything that happens at my house anyway. She has a wonderful solo album which has some of my songwriting on it. It's called Cyanide Queen, and that's by Anuet Sumlin, ANNUETSOEHNLEN. You can find either one of those by looking up our family band Whistling Fish, which are both connected, so you can look those up on streaming platforms that way. I'm on Instagram at Miracle Mats. I'm on Facebook under my full name, and folks can find me anywhere that they'd like. And I love to get messages and stuff if people have questions about songwriting or just want to say hi. I think that's a lot of fun, so love to hear from people.
Well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll see you next time.
And thank you, Sarah Kate, and for Matthew for coming and joining us for this interview today. And, I really related a lot to what Matthew was saying there at the end about manhood. And, I was reminded of a time when Matthew and Sarah Kate both came to my aid and came to my help. And I got to see Matthew's manhood on display. And that was during the July 2022 flood, whenever my family and I were trapped at our neighbor's house, and when my wife had broken her leg, and when we were finally able to get her to the hospital, Matthew and Sarah Kate both came and helped me get Liz out, or my wife Liz, out of the house and into the car. We had to get a wheelchair and roll her all the way from this house, all the way across a bridge and up a hill, in order to get her to the vehicle. And Matthew, I remember there in the midst of all the chaos, both Matthew and Sarah Kate helping roll her across in this wheelchair, and just seeing how gentle and kind he was to her. I took a pause in the midst of the chaos and just watched his gentleness and kindness and his manhood there in the midst of that. And that's something that will always stick with me. And very thankful for him and for Sarah Kate. They're both very special people in my life. And so on that, I would highly recommend you follow along with Matthew and all of his social media platforms that he mentioned there and the things that he has going on. And I encourage you to check out the Appalachian Songwriters Weekend that we have coming up. And I'll have all the links to these things in the show notes, and we encourage you to check those out. And until next time, we'll see you then.
The Heineman Cast is brought to you by the faithful and generous supporters of the Heineman Settlement School. For over 100 years, we've been celebrating heritage and changing lives in Central Appalachia. If you're interested in supporting the work of Heineman Settlement School, you can go to our website at www.heineman.org, or you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the handle @Heineman School.